You may have heard that Bordeaux have had to give up their status as a professional club due to financial difficulties. But that is just scratching the surface of the iceberg that is Ligue 1. So what the f is going on with French football? Now, before we get onto the wider issues of Ligue 1, and there are a lot, for those of you that don't know what happened with Bordeaux, here's a quick recap. Bordeaux have won Ligue 1 6 times, most recently in 2009, but they were most dominant in the 1980s. Big and often world-class players have either come through their academy or have played for them. We're talking the likes of Sylvain Wiltord, Jean Tigana, Christophe Dugarry, and of course, Zinedine Zidane. Now, due to the hardships brought on by the pandemic and media licensing, which we'll come to shortly, coupled with the poor financial stewardship of the club, Bordeaux ended up going into administration in 2021. But the fans thought they might have a saving grace when former Lille owner and current owner of Boa Vista in Portugal, Gerard Lopez, acquired the club. Now, he injected 60 million euros into the club during his ownership. But within his first season, Bordeaux finished bottom of the table and were relegated to Ligue 2. The DNCG, the professional body responsible for overseeing accounts and the financials of clubs in France, then, due to the poor financial state of the club, relegated Bordeaux to the Championnat National. That sounded Italian. Bordeaux appealed the decision, citing it as brutal. They won that appeal and they were reinstated into Ligue 2 for the 2022-23 season. But at the end of the 2023-24 season, they were administratively relegated again to Ligue 3, which is something they initially appealed, but then they withdrew that appeal. But a white knight looked to be on the horizon in the form of the Fenway Group, aka Liverpool's owners. However, when it was made public that takeover talks had broken down and Fenway were withdrawing from negotiations, well, that just leads us to the situation we're in now, with the owners of Bordeaux, a club that 14 years ago made the quarterfinals of the Champions League, making their decision to give up their status as a professional club and terminating all players' contracts with immediate effect. Now, it looks like they will continue to play in Ligue 3, the third division, next season as a semi-professional club at their 42,000-seater home stadium, which is the 6th biggest in the country. Now, if you want to draw any parallels as to what that might look like, just think Glasgow Rangers 2013 after their demotion. But why is this Bordeaux story so intrinsically linked with the financial mess that Liga finds itself in? Well, Bordeaux were actually about one of 6 or 7 clubs who were facing potential bankruptcy due to the financial issues with the league. That includes teams such as Lens, who were second in Liga in 2022-2023, and Nantes, who are 8 times winners of the league. So what are those issues? Well, I'll tell you, that's why you've clicked on the video. TV rights and COVID, but mainly TV rights. This is genuinely quite the tale of woe for Ligue 1 and its representative clubs. Now, the TV rights saga started in 2018 when Lebrun, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Ligue 1 president and former president of Marseille, decided to accept a deal from Spanish media giant Media Pro to broadcast Ligue 1 matches. Now, this deal would see the league move away from Canal Plus as their main broadcaster for the first time since 1984. And the deal was huge. 800 million euros per season. And Lebrun said that when the rights will be renegotiated in the future, they will be worth in excess of 1 billion euros per year. In hindsight, to say this was wishful thinking would be a massive understatement. Not only did MediaPro not make it for the full 4 years of their contract, but due to the pandemic and a disastrous fall in their own subscribers, they actually made it only 2 years, which, when they broke their contract, left a lot of clubs in fear of bankruptcy. Oh, and MediaPro only paid about 250 million euros during that time, when they should have been paying over $1 billion. But there's more. As the league needed a cash injection to help clubs, they sold a 13% stake in those TV rights to American investors, CVC Capital, which, while it did help in the short term and got cash to those clubs, it means that any TV deal made moving forward, CVC Capital will get 13%. Absolute shambles. So after MediaPro pulled out and all of these clubs were worried about bankruptcy, the league went on the hunt for a new broadcast partner. And they ended up, as many of us do when we're shopping around, on Amazon. But Amazon would only pay a fraction of the 800 million euros that MediaPro had originally promised. And when I say a fraction, it wasn't half. In fact, they only paid 250 million. Oh, and when it came time for the TV rights to come up for auction again, Amazon went, nah, and decided it just wasn't worth bidding on. Now, with the likes of Messi, Neymar and Mbappe no longer in the league, you can kind of see why Amazon thought that, but we'll come to that later. But this is where it gets really silly. When the league put the rights up for auction again recently, they decided that none of the bids were good enough. So they shut down the auction and decided to go straight to the broadcasters to negotiate directly. Now, out of those broadcasters, DAZN put forward the best deal, worth about 400 million euros per season, coupled with Qatari-owned broadcaster beIN Sports, who would co-broadcast, but only pay 100 million euros per season. But for that 100 million, they would broadcast the best game of the weekend. Essentially, what was happening is Qatar only wanted to broadcast Qatari-owned PSG's games. Don't tell me. Oh, and as a side note, allegedly, and I'm saying allegedly because I don't want to get in trouble, beIN Sports requested that all players wear a Visit Qatar badge on their shirts for every game that they were involved in that would be broadcast on beIN Sports. You can read into that what you will. Anyway, this brought up a new dilemma. Should the league accept these terms, or should they try and launch their own platform, which would have included a deal with Warner Brothers? Now, as an aside, I love the idea of each individual league having their own platforms, sort of like a Netflix for football. I think if it was done right, it would bring the cost for the consumer down massively. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be done right and they try and price gouge at every single point that they could, but you know, in theory, it's a lovely idea. Anyway, back to the dilemma. Go with the DAZN deal of 400 million per season, which remember is half the amount MediaPro had offered back in 2018. Or set up their own platform linked with Warner Brothers, which could theoretically generate about 600 million euros per year. I'll give you 3 seconds to decide what they did. We all know what they did. They went with DAZN and beIN Sports. Now, was this a poor decision? Probably. Some estimates show because of this deal, next year's league winners, PSG, hope I masked that well enough, will only receive about 6 million euros as winners of the league, which is the same that Clermont received last year, and they finished bottom. Oh, and also DAZN have a break clause in this contract, which means they can exit the contract after 2 years if they're not hitting their subscriber numbers, which they won't. Now, none of this is a problem for the likes of PSG with their billionaire owners, but for the majority of the league, not benefiting for the next 4 years from the sort of money that they expected will have disastrous effects. But before you start worrying, this combined DAZN and beIN Sports deal worth around 500 million euros per year is just for the domestic TV rights. Doesn't bring into account the international TV rights, which are worth another 160 million. Then again, I suppose they sold 13% of that to CVC, didn't they? So that 160 million's kind of worth about 80 million when you combine it all. Shit. So where does French football go from here? I mentioned earlier that the likes of Messi, Neymar and Mbappe have all left the league. Now, a lot of people say that Mbappe was a major draw for Ligue 1. Well, yes, to an extent, but also no, not really. Yes, of course, fans would want to see what Mbappe was up to, but they wouldn't necessarily think, oh, I've just watched PSG versus Marseille, and now I might just have a nice little sit down and watch Auxerre versus Montpellier. Look, this is a signal for what is happening with TV rights across Europe. Serie A struggled to sell their rights last season, settling for around 900 million euros instead of about 1.15 billion. And then in Germany, there was also controversy after DAZN made an antitrust complaint following their bid for the Bundesliga TV rights. All in all, what does this mean for Ligue 1? You know how people talk about small clubs will always remain small because as soon as they start becoming successful, they have to sell their best players, thus keeping them perpetually in that small club realm. I think that will happen on a bigger scale than it already is in Ligue 1. And rightly or wrongly, if you were under the impression that Ligue 1 was a farmers' league before all of this, well, it's about to get a whole lot worse. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the content, please do consider liking and subscribing. I'm also available on the Footy Social Club. Check out our YouTube channel there, where we do predictions and regular podcasts all about the beautiful game we all love. See you on the next one.